Hello, Comets. My name is Nidhi Godke, and I'm the managing editor of the Mercury. I'm sitting here with Dr. David E. Daniel, who's the president of UTD. He's recently been named the Deputy Chancellor and the Chief Operating Officer of the UT system. How are you doing, Dr. Daniel?
I'm doing great. Hi, it's great to be here with you this morning.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by asking you if you could describe your role as the Deputy Chancellor of the UT system.
Well, I will be helping Chancellor and Admiral William McRaven with the operations of the UT system, with planning strategy. He's asked me to help him particularly to focus on student success, improving research, and interfacing between the UT system and campuses to try to help the campuses even more.
All right. You started at UTD in 2005. Could you describe your goals coming into the university and your successes regarding those goals?
It is, that's correct. June 1, 2005, almost exactly 10 years ago today, I started at UTD. There had been a study done by the Washington Advisory Group right before I came, commissioned by the University of Texas, a system to evaluate UT Dallas and several other institutions and what was needed in order to elevate them to Tier 1 research university status. The Washington Advisory Group, I think, got it exactly right, and they said we simply lacked scale. We weren't big enough in critical departments and as an institution to compete with the best research universities. So I saw my main task as president, in addition to continuing the wonderful quality of student recruiting, success of education, to be the growing and expansion of the campus, to scale up UT Dallas to a larger student body, larger size of faculty, more academic programs, and get us to scale to compete with the best universities.
Right. And you said that the university that you mentioned that was needed critical growth in certain areas. What has been the biggest growth you've seen during your tenure?
Probably growth in the engineering school and growth in the arts and technology program are two of the sort of most spectacular growth areas. At commencement this past week, one of the 8, I think it was, ceremonies had biomedical engineering students and mechanical engineering students, and the activity center was filled with students and parents, and I couldn't help but reflect on the fact that none of those students, quote, existed 5 years ago. These are new degree programs that have only come about in the last few years, and there we had a full gymnasium of students. So that has certainly been the obvious growth, but it's organic and underneath everything. For example, the School of Management has created new programs in real estate, in sales. The School of Behavioral and Brain Sciences continues to grow. Interdisciplinary Studies has added healthcare as one of its specialties. So it's sort of been organic and across the board for the whole university, with these sort of node points of spectacular growth for new programs, or in the case of ATEC, what was just a beginning program in 2005.
All right, and what are some of the things that you worked on here or experienced that you'll take with you to your new positions?
Well, one thing I'll take with me is how important it is to have great people working with you and for you. We've got an exceptional group of vice presidents, an exceptional group of deans, and that certainly is a lesson. There's just no substitute for quality leadership in an organization. But I think the other thing I'll take with me is the realization that setting some big goals and sticking with those goals for a period of years, and getting an entire campus behind that set of goals, so we're all sort of carrying the water together, carrying it in the same direction, has such a positive impact. But it does take some discipline, and you do have to stick with these things for a few years. So I think there are lots and lots of lessons for me that I hope will be helpful as I take my experience and apply it across the UT system.
Speaking of these new roles, when did the opportunity present itself, and how was it consolidated?
Well, it presented itself several weeks ago when Chancellor McRaven picked up the phone and out of the blue asked me if I would think about that possibility. And we spent quite a bit of time on the phone and face-to-face in the ensuing days so that I could understand what he had in mind and what I might contribute, and for us to get to know each other. And I must say, Admiral McRaven is one of the most phenomenal people I've ever met. I see why he gets such great accolades as a leader, and I hope that my experience as a university president can be helpful to him as he takes big ideas and tries to sense how to make that a reality within the institutions.
Just a follow-up to that question, we went on our social media outlets and asked other comments to present questions for you, and on Twitter, Daniel Calhoun asked a question regarding your role with Chancellor McRaven. And he's been a Navy SEAL for 37 years, and he retired as a 4-star admiral. And Daniel Calhoun wanted to know how will you help Chancellor McRaven transition from a role in the military to a role in academics?
I don't think Admiral McRaven's going to have any difficulty whatsoever transitioning to civilian life. He's a brilliant man. He gets the differences between the military and civilian life, but he also, I think, is very aware of some of the best practices that the military embraces that he might be able to employ. For example, it's very common, as I've come to learn in the military, to have a commander and a deputy commander, and they sort of help each other and play off each other, and previously that's not been the structure. I actually received a letter just this morning from former Chancellor Hans Mark of the UT system, who congratulated me on my appointment. He was Chancellor back in the 1980s and told me that he had tried back in the 1980s to create a deputy chancellor position, but there was so much other stuff going on with budget cuts, and this was back in the real estate crisis of the 1980s, long before most of our students were born. Ask your parents about that. At any rate, I think there are a lot of great practices from the military that can be helpful. And at the same time, for me, as Admiral McRaven has said, one of his key priorities is further enhancing student success, and he's very sincere about that. Not just graduation rates, but the ability of students to be successful in their lives, to develop their own leadership skills. And he turns to me and says, David, how can we do that? Can you help me figure out how we can get that done? So the transition for him has been, and undoubtedly will continue to be, very smooth. I think the military experience brings a lot of value.
You said the role of Deputy Chancellor is a new position, so what will you be bringing to the role that will help set an example for future prospects that will take the position? Well,
I actually was in Austin all day yesterday meeting with a lot of the senior leaders, and I closed each conversation with the question, how can I help you? And I think every Vice Chancellor and Executive Vice Chancellor said to me, it's great to have you here because you bring the perspective of an institution's president to the table. And I think it's important to realize that the University of Texas system is sort of like the central headquarters or corporate headquarters, but they don't offer any degrees. Those are offered on the institutions. They don't have any students. The students are all at the academic and health institutions. So I think having someone on the leadership who's fresh out of a great institution that's doing really, really well can bring a perspective and an understanding to the table that I hope will be useful.
On Facebook, Maria Luisa Popescu asked the question, what are the best practices from UTD's development that you'd like to apply to the overall system?
Well, I'd say one best practice is listen to students. Our students have been so helpful to the growth of this university. I'll just give one example. When I first came, we had no residence halls on campus, just apartments. And our students came to us and said, we think we ought to have residence halls. Apartments are nice, but there's not enough mingling with one another. They're a little too isolating. And frankly, I was not convinced that we really wanted dormitories here because the apartments seemed to be very popular. But our students pursued it with leadership from Dr. Rochevong in Student Affairs and Matt Grief. They went and visited other campuses. They came with a specific proposal, including sort of how the rooms would be laid out. And look at how incredibly successful our residence halls have been in changing the flavor of this campus. Boy, did our students get it right. I even remember when we weren't quite sure what furniture to select, and Matt Grief put the furniture options out in the student union. The students came and voted on the furniture. And so I would say trust our students. Our students are brilliant. They've got great judgment. They've got great ideas. And I know that the UT system has a student advisory council and pays attention to it, but my advice will be pay a lot of attention to what our students have to say, because my experience here has just been off the chart wonderful in terms of working with students and getting some great ideas from students.
What are some of the challenges do you think you'll face?
Not enough money, not enough money, not enough money. Those are the three challenges. There's tremendous pressure across all of America these days for funding of higher education. It's true that per student funding, essentially in every state in America, has gradually declined over the last 25 years when adjusted for inflation at the very least, if not in absolute terms, which has essentially transferred the burden of paying for higher education from state support to student support. And I think the underlying change in philosophy has been one in which previously educating students was seen as a public good and therefore should be supported by public funds. And now it's seen more as a private benefit, transferring the responsibility for payment to students, even if it means borrowing money. And yet the reality is that the very best teachers, the very best professors, like the very best talent anywhere, is not getting cheaper. The best people are always in demand, and this is great for UTD students because you guys are the best, and as you graduate, you're going to be in extremely high demand. Talents are rewarded, right? And so I can't magically make a great finance professor or a great neuroscientist on the competitive market get significantly cheaper. But yet we can't just keep increasing tuition endlessly to the point where wonderful students can't find a way to get to college. So I think the funding is by far the biggest challenge that higher education faces. Fortunately, the University of Texas System Board of Regents has an oil endowment, the so-called Permanent University Fund. And one of the things I hope I can help the University of Texas System do is think carefully about the expenditure of those funds and relate expenditures back to what Admiral McRaven's and our board's primary objectives are, such as student success. And that's where I hope my UTD experience can come to bear to help good decisions to get made.
Regarding those endowment funds, where do you think the funds will be allocated specifically throughout the system?
I think they'll be allocated where the Board of Regents wishes to allocate them. And I think our role at UT System staff level is to inform, to educate, and to help them make the best possible decisions.
Did you oversee or initiate something specifically at UTD that you'd like your successor to pay close attention to?
There have been a number of academic programs that have been initiated, and they will continue to grow. I'm thinking about living learning communities, which started on my watch, and I think those have been wildly successful. But I don't think that anything we have done here has been so off the wall that it needs any deep encouragement from me to continue it. I think it's all quite sustainable, quite logical. Any rational person would look at our living learning communities and go, wow, what a great program. So I'm not worried about things that started here being sustained here. And over time, new things get started and sometimes you stop things. But I just feel that the foundation of UT Dallas is so solid. Not necessarily because of anything I've done, but we were built right from the beginning. We've had, I think, great leadership, great students, a real sense of community here, and I think trust between students and administration, between faculty and administration. And I have no reason to think that that's going to do anything but continue. I think it's an extremely exciting opportunity for the next president. I'll say one more thing about that. I think that without any question in my mind, the next 5 years can be and will be even more exciting for UT Dallas than the last 5 years. There's just, with the growth of enrollment now, more of a critical mass. We're closer to fulfilling that observation by the Washington Advisory Group that we lacked critical mass. Well, we're not lacking so much in critical mass now, which puts us in an even more powerful position to do some great things.
You mentioned the community and the trust between the administration and the students. What will be the most missed thing about UTD for you?
The students, the faculty, and the staff, the friends. You know, it's one thing to come to work and just do a job. It's another thing to get to know people and to really work with them. Just this past year, working with Brooke and Nancy, the student government president and vice president, has been such a wonderful experience for me. In fact, as I mentioned, I was down at UT System yesterday, and at our Board of Regents meeting last week, Brooke and Nancy gave a presentation, and several people came up to me at a reception last night and just said, "Wow, I can't believe your student leaders. They did such an incredible job." And so what I'll miss is the people. It's just so many wonderful people. I'll miss getting to know this new student government leaders. Although, since I'll still be at the UT System, they won't be strangers to me. I'll be going to student advisory committee meetings and being especially interested in seeing UTD's student leaders.
That's awesome. Could you describe a particularly fond memory with any of UTD's people or community?
You know, there are so many fond memories, but walking just a few minutes ago when I pulled my car up to the parking lot, Richard Huckabee parks real close to me, and he was one of the first people I met at UT Dallas, a staff member, and I walked up to Richard. He had reached out to me when I first came here, and I think I hadn't even taken the job yet, and I was at the pub sitting down to drink a Diet Coke, and he came up and just sat down next to me and introduced himself and a couple of students he was with. That was so nice of him. You know, things like that, little things actually, to me, the things that you wouldn't normally expect are the fondest memories. I moved here from Illinois and came in June of 2005. And I remember they had mowed the grass. I think the first day I parked my car, that was grass mowing day around the administration building. And since I had lived in Texas for many years, I just noticed the smell of the freshly cut grass. And it smells different in Texas. It's different grass. The St. Augustine is different. And I thought, wow, this is nice to be back in Texas. Some of the athletic events are so exciting. The wins and the losses are special moments. When we dedicated the landscape project and Margaret McDermott made her remarks about how there weren't many trees here before, but just the incredible vision that she had and the successes that we've celebrated because people, our people, had such wonderful ideas and follow through. Those are all the fond memories are connected with people in one way or another, sometimes very little things.
Well, thank you so much for your
time. Thank you, and
Daniel.
I want to say thanks to everyone at UT Dallas. It's just been the experience of a lifetime. I will always have a smile when anybody says UTD, says UT Dallas, or does a whoosh. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you so much for your time. And if you want to check out the full story on Dr. Daniel's transition as a Deputy Chancellor and the Chief Operating Officer of the UT System, please check out the Mercury website. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great job.